market, Goya is the expert. We share the same values with our consumers, the same sensibility. That is why our ad campaigns connect with the strategic messages that move the market, along with Hispanic food enthusiasts from Europe, Asia, and North America who seek the flavor that only Goya can provide. We believe in the well-being of our communities, and we work to strengthen the ties that unite us. We are a family that keeps growing constantly. Our goal is to bring the taste of Goya to every home around the world. Because when our products reach the dining table, we get the satisfaction that comes from hearing the phrase that has inspired 4 generations of the great Goya family. If it's Goya,
it has to be good.
It has to be good.
It has to be good.
Tiene que ser bueno.
It has to be good.
Tiene que ser bueno.
It has to be good.
The countryless, the trafficked, the victims of mental health, abuse, and addiction, the orphaned.
Things will be tomorrow, I'm not things we were today.
The only way to defeat evil is with love, and we will be victorious.
Children of the world are our most precious gifts from God, but unfortunately, too easily forgotten and left for refuge, starving for love. We must protect our greatest treasures and remind society the importance of a mother, a father, and family. Goya Cares is leading this effort to bring God and family back into focus. Goya Cares, because you are a precious gift from God. The countryless.
All right. Impressive. Una vez más, por favor, for Roberto. You know, when I introduced you to Roberto, you said, mi nuera. And I turned around thinking que quisieras que yo fuera tu nuera, porque yo también soy de Maracay. But I got a little excited too fast. Don't tell my boyfriend that I said that. Okay, how are we doing? Are we excited? Yes? All right. We have more in store for you tonight. So we're going to start now with the State of Industry presentation. In order to do that, I am going to introduce to you the Senior Director of Strategic Business Intelligence, Nick Walker, and Senior Vice President of Merchandising, Brian Audet. So please help me welcome Nick and Brian.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening. My name is Nick Walker. I'm going to do a state of the industry, and then I'm going to bring Brian up, and he'll walk through what we're seeing on the supply chain side. Just a little bit of a heads up. So my team at Unify, our job is to look at the external landscape, watch competition, and inform and reduce uncertainty for our leadership team and our independent retailers. I love my job because I came from family business, and I love watching all of you succeed on the landscape. I know how incredibly critical that is for just a vibrant economy. All right, so as I go through, I'm going to go quick. We're going to talk a little bit about the industry. We're going to hit on inflation, labor, and supply chain. I'll finish it up with a little review around recession. I do want you to know these slides are certainly available to you. My contact information is also available to you. I love learning from all of you, and I know you are in the trenches. You're watching what's going on in the industry, so I learn just as much when we engage, but I want you to know that's certainly an open invitation for any questions after this. Victor, my friend, could you go to the next slide? Thank you. All right, so quick, we can see sales are up. This is driven entirely by inflation. I took a little bit of a peek at kind of a mid-month for what Nielsen has, and this has continued. Sales are in the high single digits, but you can see that units number, we're starting to see significant declines overall. This is the entirety of the U.S., ex-AOC, but we are seeing a lot of unit declines, and this is telling me that some of that price elasticity that we were concerned about, that's coming back into the consumer landscape, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. It's not just low-income consumers. It's middle-income consumers, it's high-income consumers who are feeling the pinch from what is clearly not transitory inflation. We'll talk about that in just a little bit more. But if we go to the next slide. Now, I do want to call attention to, Nielsen has a go-forward estimate on what 2023 is. I will tell you, I don't think any of the expectations for what's going to go on in 2023 are accurate right now. So it's much better to have a few scenarios in mind, to scenario plan with your teams to stay agile, because whatever these numbers are, they're going to be inaccurate. But directionally, what we're seeing is we're going to continue to see inflation stick with us. It's not going to come back down to that 2 to 3% level, certainly. A lot of those costs are not transitory, which is what we're learning. But we're also going to see unit declines continue, and I think that's because the consumer is getting pinched. We're starting to see that shift already away from discretionary goods back into non-discretionary, which I think there is opportunity there. But as you're going to hear, I do expect a deterioration in the overall economy going forward for the next 12 months. So consumers are going to continue to feel a real significant pinch, and this is just reflected in what we're seeing in some of this macro industry data. Now, we talked about a little bit of inflation. We're going to get into that right now. If we go to the next slide, please. Oh, sorry. Real quick, I did want to call this out. So this is, before we get into inflation, I do want to talk about a little bit of what we're seeing on the shift from food at home to food away from home, right? Now, food away from home, we can see historically has been taking share in dollar side. You don't have to take any pictures, guys. I'll absolutely give you these slides. Feel free to, but I'll give you these slides in my contact info. But what we're seeing is after that COVID bump, now we've started to see food away from home again start to take share. This is irrational spending. There's a lot of consumers who are pent up from the lockdowns, things like that. What we're actually seeing is a lot of consumers are spending way outside of what they really should be in food away from home, right? So that's reflected in what is kind of a subsegment. My understanding, though, on these numbers is this is just a subsegment of food at home and food away from home, right? This is not the full picture. Food at home still represents about 52.5% of occasions that the consumer is going through. And the value equation is still very favorable to food at home, but it has started to shift some. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but this is something to really be aware of. Continuing to keep occasions from food away from home is going to be a really significant effort from the industry going forward. Now, inflation certainly playing a key role in this. If we go to the next slide. I think on Friday when the Fed spoke at Jackson Hole, there was a lot of crow to be eaten there because the expectation last year that inflation was transitory, that some of this was going to come down, that was clearly not accurate, and we didn't see that as an accurate statement at the time. Now we're clearly seeing that inflation is far from transitory. If anything, we're seeing that it's going to take a much bigger effort from the Fed and for a much longer period of time and much more pain to bring inflation down. Across the landscape, now if we look at gasoline and energy, very high. And if there's any celebration around gasoline price or diesel, I'll explain why that's not going to stick around either. But food away from home, food at home, certainly still elevated. But the number I want you to look at, that shelter number at 5.7%. That's rents, that's homes. That number does not move up quickly, and it does not come down quickly. And that being significantly elevated tells us that inflation is sticking around, regardless of what we're seeing in the current landscape. The other piece is, the Personal Consumption Expenditures Price Index, CPE, or PCE, that is really the measure the Fed's looking at right now. And you can see well elevated. One single month in July when inflation comes down slightly, that's not the evidence they're looking for is if they're talking about we're going to defeat inflation. It's going to have to be multiple months that you're seeing CPI on the left and PCE come down. And that's going to be a tough battle. In fact, I would expect you're going to continue to see a little bit of the bludgeoning of the economy with Fed rates for at least the next 2 to 3 months. The numbers in August are going to have to be really, really good to avoid a 75 bip lift. And that's a blunt instrument in terms of combating inflation. So not a great outlook at the moment on this. If we go to the next slide, we can see food at home versus food away from home. Food at home clearly outpacing food away from home for the past year and a half. I did also include the estimates from the USDA. You can see food at home is still well elevated in the double digits by the end of this year. The expectation for 2023 is that this comes down. I will tell you, I would take that with a lot of grains of salt. There's a lot of politics that goes into the 2023 estimate. Obviously, USDA can't say inflation is going to be really high in the next year. You also have to kind of look at the sources sometimes of these. Our expectation right now, they're modeling is inflation around 4 to 4.5% for food at home in 2023. And that's if everything goes well with commodities and there isn't another existential crisis that has started to become more of the norm than not. If we go to the next slide, we also track very closely what's going on with the Ppi Index. Broadly, what I can tell you is we have not seen any real evidence on the macro side that food inflation has peaked. We'll be watching this very closely in the next month. We watch this incredibly closely just to see what's going to happen. Now, I do think there was some hope in June that maybe PPI had peaked. That clearly wasn't the case in July. We'll watch for August. But we're seeing that margins across a lot of different categories are continuing to be impacted by this. So again, this is something to really be aware of. Now, some key drivers around inflation. If we go to the next slide, certainly consumer expectations. Oh, next slide. Thank you. Consumer expectations around inflation. Now, this was, if we were showing you the data from March, we would have been seeing low-income consumers absolutely feeling the pinch from inflation. They did feel we were seeing them shift channel and trade down in product. Now we're starting to see it's coming from the middle-income consumer. We're also seeing consumers up to $100,000 income in households that are also changing behavior fundamentally. So we're actually seeing a little bit more of this than we were even a month ago. Now, this is just June data. The July data and the August data are pointing to similar trends that have accelerated. Next slide, please. Now, when we look at fuel and gasoline prices down slightly, still up 50% from where they were last year. So there should be no celebration on where that's at. And the expectation really for the go-forward estimate in 2023 is that they only come down slightly, right? And that's if everything in Europe goes well in terms of energy, which is far from certain. Diesel also expected to stay high. I would actually expect diesel to pop up in the second half of this year and go up. What we're seeing is a lot of the capacity was brought online because of the demand. That's going to come down. And because that capacity is going to come down, we're actually going to see fewer, so that's going to lift that price up. So fuel right now has come down, but we expect this to pop up. Next slide. All right, I think these are two of the most important slides when we're talking about the economy. The first is the labor force participation rate. This is really a measure of everyone 16 years and older who is looking for a job or is contributing to the economy. This has not recovered from kind of its drop in the pandemic. This has me really concerned because this tells us that tight labor market that we're dealing with, it's not going away, right? We're not getting more people back into it. I'd really like to see efforts around this to improve, but this is telling me that the labor market's going to stay tight. The other slide, really on the right there, it's a little messed up, but we'll get a better version to you. Essentially what that is the idea of how does the Fed land the plane, right? That green line is the number of job openings. That brown, black line is the unemployment rate. Essentially what they have to do is bring job openings down without the unemployment rate going up. That does not happen often in history. So it's a really tough needle to thread there. What I would expect is we're going to see that unemployment rate come up in the next few months. We're going to see the labor market slow, mostly because the Fed they've started to take a bludgeon to the economy, but we're also seeing companies start to announce layoffs. Yes, there are a lot of white-collar jobs right now, but that's going to continue as that demand that a lot of consumers had flips, and we start to see more people impacted by inflation for a longer period of time. Next slide. Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. These are all a little messed up, huh? All right. Layoffs. Layoffs and quits. Quits are often an estimate of how confident is someone if they quit their job, they're going to find another job. That's historically elevated. People are still really confident that they're going to find another job out there. Layoffs are still historically low. That is also going to change in the next few months. We're going to see layoffs start to pump, and I would say in the next month we're going to see that number come out. And quits are also starting to come down. People are getting a little less confident. Again, still a very tight labor market. You've got roughly 1.8 jobs for every unemployed individual in the United States right now. but really critical. And the other is this average hourly earnings, those numbers need to come down precipitously for the Fed to be comfortable with where inflation's at. Really, it's because that's what is driving inflation right now is wages, right? We're going to see wages start to come down. That's going to help us with the inflation picture. I do think what we're going to see is that's going to pop up slightly again, but when it does drop, it's going to drop pretty precipitously, and that'll be the key to inflation. Next slide. All right, on to macro indicators. There's about 60 of these that we track. The other important one, the Baltic Dry Index, that's sitting at about the lowest level it's been since December of 2020, really an indicator of demand has started to come down. That's where we're starting to see a little bit of relief. But overall, in the macro picture for the supply chain, still very difficult. Now, there's been modicum improvements here and there, still a lot of difficulty, and I would say it's less about really significant improvements in any parts of those bubbles and more about demand, particularly around discretionary goods, has started to come down. Two things I want to call out. The Cass Freight Index, still well elevated. If you want to see inflation drop, you have to see some of the elements of that drop. That tells me that inflation is not transitory. It's not coming down as much as we would have expected. The other, and apologies again, the retail inventories to sales ratio, that's really telling us how much inventory do these retailers have. Now, food and beverage has not recovered to its pre-pandemic level. It's close, but it hasn't recovered, really reflecting that there's outages across different categories, but it's not as broad-based as it was last year or 2 years ago. On the flip side of that, normal retailers, their merchandise inventory is way up. That's why we're seeing a lot of discretionary discounts across Walmart, Dollar General, players like that. So we're seeing a lot of discounts there, and I expect that to continue because they have far and away elevated inventory versus historic levels. Next slide. All right, 2 slides and then we're done. The only thing I want to call out is this is what it looks like when consumer expectations about inflation are up anchored. And this is what the Fed is most concerned about is if everyone assumes that inflation is here to stay and it's going to continue to elevate, then we have a real serious issue with inflation spirals. That's what I would say has occurred with some of these numbers. Now, the longer-term inflation numbers, the 10-year, the 5-year, those are still relatively benign at the moment, but they're still elevated. That 1-year number, that's what the Fed is most serious in watching, and they have to bring these down. These have to come down with consumer expectations for them to stop kind of those rate hikes, which I would expect are going to continue for at least this year, and they're going to hold them through 2023. That's very clear at the moment. Finally, my last slide. If we could click through. Yep. All right. What I did is I told you I don't put much stock in any one individual number estimate, but we do look at a lot of aggregated number estimates and try to give some scenarios. And I think that's going to be most critical going forward is to build some scenarios and have your teams plan around those for agility. What you can see here is pretty much every major bank out there, a lot of economists are betting on what's going on with recession, right? There is no one who can tell you when a recession will occur. I can tell you right now there will be a recession, but I can't tell you exactly when that timing is going to be, right? I would tell you, though, now that the risk of a recession has never been higher than it is right now, and that's because of what the Fed is doing. It is currently slowing the economy down, and they view a recession as the lesser of two evils. They have to bring inflation down, and they're willing to cause quite a bit of pain for that to occur. You can see most banks have it as a toss-up right now. That's because nobody wants to be the first to put out an estimate that's going to be wrong. I do think as you're planning out, if you have a positive scenario, a benign-ass scenario, build a couple that are less benign. The recession's not going to be the same as the 08, 09, but it's certainly going to be one that there's going to be some pain, and it's one that the risk is material enough that you should be planning for that. I know I went through a whirlwind. I'm going to hand this off to Brian Audette. But I want you to know my contact information is at the end of this, and if you'd like to catch me and speak, please do. It was an honor to be with all of you. Thank you very much.
All right, good evening. Thank you, Nick. As Nick said, I'm Brian Audette. I'm the SVP of Merchandising at UNFI. I do want to thank Nick for providing those macro economic overview of the current situation. It'll be a good foundation for what I'm going to talk about, what we're facing in the industry. As you know, supply chain has certainly been a journey over the last 2+ years, and I appreciate the opportunity to provide you my perspective of the challenges, but also the outlook moving forward. Over the next 10 minutes or so, I plan to provide some service level insights, some supplier recovery timelines, category insights, and a little bit of perspective on supplier price changes and trade funds moving forward. So let's take a look at the latest. If you go to 2 slides up, please. Thank you. So we continue to see gradual improvement in overall service levels. However, plant capacity, ingredient availability, packaging shortages, and labor continue to challenge suppliers, many of our suppliers, as Nick said. Also, in some categories, we continue to expect long-term ongoing challenges into 2024, and pet food is a good example of this. Looking forward, however, we expect continued gradual improvements, but it'll take a while before we experience pre-pandemic service levels. One interesting fact as I look at our service level information across the country is over the course of the past 2 years, we've actually seen better service level on private brand items than overall national brands. Other insights you see on this slide, suppliers have communicated increased confidence and improvements overall in their operations and their supply chain. The number of allocated and restricted items are declining overall. The transportation load to truck ratios are improving. They're now at 3.3 to 1, down from 19 loads to 1 truck in January. And in the refrigerated side, it's about 7 to 1, 7 loads per truck for reefers. Overall, ports are improving on all parts of the country, although we continue to watch the West Coast longshoreman situation as that contract was up July 1st. There is not a contract yet, but there has been no work stoppage. As Nick said, fuel costs have moderated, although we do expect diesel to increase again as we go into the holiday season. So all this leads to gradual improvement, as I said earlier. If you go to the next slide. You know, we're talking to suppliers over the last couple of years on a weekly basis, and what they're telling us, and this is 2022, their biggest concern right now is production capacity challenges. It's now the #1 concern, followed by raw materials and labor in their plants. And if you look at earlier in the year, as we came out of Omicron, raw materials was the biggest issue as we looked at that January, February, March timeframe. That since has given way to production challenges and just sheer plant capacity. The next slide. So since COVID, we've been tracking restricted and allocated items. So these are items that suppliers basically tell us there's only a limited supply, or we're actually stopping the supply of items for a time. So if you look at this is 2022. As we came out of Omicron in the first part of the year, in January and February, this was the highest level of restricted or allocated items that we saw since COVID began. We almost hit 30%. That has improved throughout the year, and now we're at around 15%. But when you think about it, that starts us off at about an 85% service level when 15% of the items are allocated or restricted. 80% of all of our conventional out of stocks are due to allocated or restricted items across the country. Next slide. The other issue we continue to face is late or missed or unappointed loads at our DCs. We continue to see missed appointments, and the suppliers are really telling us this is related to carrier capacity, production delays, and carrier compliance. One of the things that we and other wholesalers are doing is really trying to push to control as much of the inbound freight as possible through backhauls, through also unify managed loads or carriers, so we can control and get better deliveries into our facilities. Next slide. We'll dig into some categories here, and what I have here on this slide, on the left-hand side is our natural business, and on the right-hand side is our conventional business. On the natural side, 40% of total out-of-stocks are driven by the top 10 impacted categories. 4 of those top 10 category fill rates are actually below 80% inbound to our facilities. And in natural, the 3 most impacted categories are baby, largely due to baby formula, alternative snacks, and oils and shortening. If you look at the conventional side of our business, 55% of our out-of-stocks are driven by the top 10 categories that are impacted. 7 of 10 of those categories we're actually seeing 50% or less inbound fill rates from the suppliers. And the 3 most impacted categories are baby, pet, and wholesome snacks. If you look at the total list of the 10, after wholesome snacks, with the recent General Mills issues with their wholesome snacks, we're seeing dry pasta, tabletop and picnic, paper plates. Jif, the peanut butter issue, is driving the peanut butter and preserves. Summer demand of Gatorade is driving the isotonics. And shelf-stable juices, I actually have a deeper dive on that in an upcoming slide, along with confections in the aisle. So the next couple slides, I highlighted what I call red categories or suppliers. And this is basically the communication the suppliers are providing us, saying that these categories will not fully recover until sometime in 2023. The ramen category continues to be a challenge, and both Nissan and Marichan continue to have capacity issues. Demand for that product continues to be high, and inflation is driving even greater demand. So there's a to be determined on when we'll see recovery there. The pet piece with Nestle Pet, you can see 2024 is when we're expecting full recovery on pet, mainly driven by wet cat and wet dog. And then other categories from Nestle USA, baby food and formula due to the formula situation, milk with Coffee Mate and Starbucks liquid coffee, and then frozen entrees, all predicted to recover in early 2023. If you go to the next slide, this digs in a little deeper into shelf-stable juice. There's really 4 areas that are driving this issue. 2 by Kraft Heinz with Capri Sun and Kool-Aid. That really is a demand as well as a packaging and ability to produce issue for both Capri Sun and Kool-Aid. And then Ocean Spray and V8, we're also seeing packaging concerns really driven by the single-serve aluminum cans for the V8 and the Ocean Spray single-serve items. And again, recovery for these are sometime in early 2023. And finally, if you look at personal care, there's 2 categories we consider red right now that will continue to see challenges. One is skin care, and one is cough and cold remedies. Both of these categories, you can see the fill rates for us are somewhere in that 50 to 45 or 45 to 50% on cough and cold remedies. We expect to have a much better season this year on cough and cold because the manufacturers are in a lot better shape. However, there are some ingredient issues that they're seeing. And then skin care, much better than cough and cold, but we continue to see challenges in that category. Next slide. So this slide, as we meet with suppliers on a regular basis, they're constantly giving us the most current recovery timelines that they are currently seeing in their business. One of the things that we continue to see, especially in our conventional business, is 17% of the deferred recovery, or 17% of the suppliers have deferred recovery. So in other words, earlier in the summer, they tell us the items are going to recover on this time frame, and the reality is they're deferring those 17% of the time. So we continue to see suppliers come back to us with different recovery dates than they expected due to other issues coming up in their supply chain. All right, next slide. So I wanted to provide a little bit of perspective on pricing, so inflation and promotional support trade funds. And I just finished a meeting with 15 of the top suppliers in our business 2 weeks ago to really get perspective from their leadership on what they're seeing both on inflation and their intent to promote moving forward. We continue to see list price increases from both branded and private brand suppliers. We're very focused on ensuring appropriate notice to our customers so they can make the appropriate changes in their business, as well as making sure we have fair and equitable treatment across all channels with price increases. We did hear from our suppliers that they do anticipate additional pricing as we go through the rest of this year, and as Nick said, really need to watch this on a close basis. Some facts: over the last 18 months, we've been tracking price increases across all the conventional manufacturers, and we've seen anywhere between 3 to 6 different rounds of price increases in those 18 months across the suppliers. And the total percentage increases we've seen, depending on the category and vendor, is anywhere from 10 to 40%. So we've seen some categories raise as high as 40% over the last 18 months. We've also seen promotional spend reductions or suspensions during supply issues during COVID. One of the things we do hear from all the suppliers is overall they're committed to bringing back trade to historical levels as we plan moving forward. However, there are a few that continue to struggle with supply, so have not committed to exactly when that's going to happen. We also are watching closely the level of price increases coupled with the promotional spend. Obviously, really wanting to make sure we help our customers stay competitive, in their retail environments. And that is it. Thank you.
All right. Hello, everybody. It's me again. I think I have enough information now to pass an economics degree thanks to this fabulous information that we got from these two gentlemen. If you guys need to follow up with them, please make sure you do so after the event so you can get all of the information that you need. Now, before we continue, I'd like to thank some people who are in the audience today. And starting with the NSA board, we have our president, Samuel Collado, Nayeli de Jesus, Pedro Goico, Frank Zapata, Iván Bueno, Dani Liz, Jorge Guillén, y Rafael Núñez. With the, yes, please give it up for them. With the NSA Past Presidents, we have Pablo Espinal, William Rodriguez, Nelson Eusebio, Francisco Jorge, David Corona y Rudy Fuertes. Entre nuestros invitados de hoy tenemos a Osmar Benítez del grupo JAD y Francisco Marte, presidente de la Asociación de Bodegas. También hoy con nosotros está el presidente de NSA Florida, Ajak One, sorry, excuse me. And the Florida board members, Carlos Hernández, Richard Díaz, y Kenny Taveras. We also have the Director of Latino Affairs, Sofia Sayas, and the New York State Governor, Kathy Hochul, as well as, Betty Enriquez, Director of the New York State Officer of Trade and Tourism. Welcome, and thank you for being here with us today. All right, and to continue on, we are starting with the Industry Leadership Panel. And so I want to introduce to you guys tonight the person who is going to be moderating this panel. Please help me welcome Carlos Hernández.
Thank you, thank you. Well, that was a lot of information on those slides, huh? We got a lot of facts, and now we're going to have a lot of opinions. Okay, so we have to keep it loose and bring some positivity, because I don't know how Nick sleeps at night. We have trouble running our own businesses with everything that's going on. That guy has to chew on all that information. That's tough. That's tough. So without further ado, I want to bring up our panelists. Are we supposed to bring these chairs together, I think? Or are we going to make these guys stand? My first panelist from Key Food, Chief Operating Officer George Knobloch. From Crasdale, Chief Merchandising Officer Dennis Hickey. From Associated, we got Vice President of Merchandising, Jonathan D'Onofrio. And from Porky Products, we got President John Ewing. You beat everybody. So we got a couple questions for these guys. Hopefully, we're going to get a different perspective from people. We got a national perspective from the guys from Unify, and it's amazing information. And we've worked in Florida with Nick before. During COVID, he did a couple Zoom calls for us, and it was amazing information, similar to what you got. And the information was pretty much the same outcome as what he was talking about now. So the information hasn't changed much. We went over all the similar slides with him, and he is a wealth of knowledge. And I do suggest that for any stores or group, NSA, reach out to Nick, because they're a wealth of information. So welcome, guys. How are you?
Good. Thank you.
Very good. So for the first question I have, and we're going to start with George, because he's the most talkative. George, due to the market conditions, food retailing has changed forever, as we've been seeing. Can you share some insight on the biggest challenges we face and what strategies you're using to overcome them?
Sure. So I think Nick did an outstanding job of explaining just what those are, right? So you have, and so did Brian for that matter. So challenges in product supply, right? So we've seen that for the past 2.5 years, right? So hard to promote, hard to get enough inventory to promote, hard to keep the shelves full, and everything's on allocation, right? So that's one of the big challenges, obviously. The other one is inflation, right? We've seen 2 or 3 price increases over the past 2 years across many brands also. And I think you're going to see those price increases continue as well. And then labor, just labor shortages in general, and people wanting to work at home. And I think those for us would be probably the 3 biggest challenges that we see. So I would say with product supply, everything's on allocation. Try to make sure we have the right allocation, right? The best allocation we possibly can, but I kind of like herding cats a little bit. It's hard to really understand what that actually is. But when we run our ad, we try to make sure that what we put in the ad, what we put in our weekly circular, we have enough inventory to make sure we can cover that. When it comes to labor, frankly, we've had probably more turnover than we like, but we feel it's easier to keep our employees than replace our employees, so we pay them. Right? We've made, I'll say, we've given salary increases sort of outside of the normal time frame. And then when it comes to inflation, not a lot we can do about that. Try to run as good as that as we possibly actually can. I do think that, as Brian sort of alluded, although a lot of the manufacturers have pulled back trade, that a lot of those manufacturers are public companies, and I think once they start to comp those inflation numbers, they've got to grow. They've got to show growth to keep their value up. I think once they start to comp those inflation numbers, you're going to see a bunch of trade dump back into the system, and you're going to see, I think, a pretty aggressive high-low activity.
That's a great point. And to add to that, if we are seeing inflation go up, prices go up, as a retailer, sometimes isn't inflation good if prices go up? If we work on a certain margin, do stores make more money during inflationary periods?
I would say if the cost of product went up in and of itself, maybe, but you're seeing units decline, but the cost of everything is going up, right? So cost of labor is going up, cost of equipment is going up, everything is going up. So it's not just cost of goods in isolation.
Dennis?
So I think when you look at the inflation, you know, and we talked about it's good because prices go up, we make more money. The thing that's alarming, and we've seen this in New York, and now we got a national perspective, is the units are off. So that's something we've got a close eye on. We've all got to watch that because transactions are a big part of our business. The foot traffic is very important. And if that starts to go along with the decline in units, the inflation is not going to help our business at all. Relative to all the talk on inflation, recession, supply chain, I'll just add two things because I think we've beat it up enough. But relative to the inflation or the recession, I think the impact it's had on supply chain is ongoing. And first on the inflation, you're going to see a rise in your private label business. So look at your private label program and see how you can strengthen that, both in terms of where it is on the shelf, how you price it, and merchandising display activity. And pricing is very important because when you go around the stores, you look in the stores, you see a lot of these alternate brands in there. And really, you know, buying it is only half the challenge. The other challenge is selling it at a fair price where you can make your margin. And in a lot of instances, that'll compress margins a little bit because there's only so much price between the value proposition of private label and the brand price. You can only fit so much in there. So if you have too many brands in there and you don't have the right pricing strategy, margins can get away from you. Now, relative to supply chain, you know, running a warehouse in Hunts Point hasn't been fun during the pandemic. And we've seen a significant drop in our assortment as products, and they covered it during the UNFI presentation, that there's been delisting, deauthorization, whatever they want to call it. There is not as many products available as there were. We're going through right now, and over the next 4 or 5 months, we're in the process of reviewing close to 2,000 items. In one form or another, were in distribution last year and are not in this year. That doesn't mean the item was lost. Maybe a pack change, maybe a new item that didn't, but we have to go through that process. And that's only the beginning. Because after that, then how are we going to work to get it back on the shelf and let the customers know that these items are now available, and those are items that you need on your shelf. So that's going to be an ongoing working process. That's going to take a lot of time and a lot of effort from all of us, but I think it's critical to how we address the challenges that were brought forth in supply chain from the pandemic.
It's awesome to see how we've adapted, right, to accept these challenges and to go forward and fill those locations, fill those spots on the shelves with other product, waiting for that other product to come in. It's really been a challenge on both ends. Jason? Jonathan, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, one other challenge we face is just really helping our stores manage costs, and their profitability. So I think we've been challenged to really help the stores find things like off-shelf displays, shippers, things that provide more profitability to them, utilizing our in-store execution team that really helps manage shelf tags, keeping pricing up to date, making sure they're not throwing away any margin that's really out there, especially based on how many price changes. We've talked about it, you know, at length here, but how many price changes have come through, making sure they have the most up-to-date information. And then cost. How do we help the stores manage their costs? So we've put together this program called our ASG Academy. So we try to educate the stores. We try to provide them with insights from an industry expert or an expert on the subject matter to really help them understand, you know, how can they really help manage their shrink? How can they lower their cost to serve? How can they manage some of their like overhead and energy costs, things like that? And I think it's really our responsibility to make sure that, you know, we tackle both of those things, profitability, cost, and pretty much one of the biggest struggles I think we've had.
Awesome. How about on the protein side, John?
On the protein side, well, basically the same problems. We probably dealt with them a little bit differently. Labor, for one, is our #1 problem. And we have strategically, I'd say, we've been very, very aggressive with recruiting. We've also been flexible, which everyone out here needs to be, being an independent grocer. Flexibility in hours. We have accommodated people to work from home, which is a stress on our culture, for sure. But we think it's worked out well. And you know what? We may not like it, but we're dealing with a, basically, for lack of a better term, a commodity that's scarce. And we're doing the best we can to get our share of that. And it costs a lot. We've paid a lot. And I think that'll continue. I appreciate Nick's numbers. To me, I don't see the labor market easing as much as he does. But that's my experience, and that's what I see for this year. That's what I see for next year. We have a 5.5% labor rate, increase in labor, an 8.5% inflation rate. The rate of inflation might come down. The rate of wages might come down, but wages aren't coming down, and I don't see prices coming down. It's a little different. The rate will come down. So that's a challenge, but I think it's here to stay. I know it's here to stay.
On the pricing side with protein, do you think it's related to production, kills, whatever you want to call it, or is it transportation and labor?
Well, it's both, for sure. I mean, labor is a problem in all the facilities. They can't find work. And obviously, with the price of fuel, everything is moved by trucks. So diesel is up diesel's up almost 50%. So, and that's not coming down. I agree with Nick on that also. So we hedge our fuel. We know what they think it's going to cost next year, and it's not pretty. So I don't expect prices to come down very much.
That said, we're talking about production, we're talking about products, filling shelves, products missing, right? Allocations on everything. We have a lot of international companies that are going to be attending the show as vendors. What's your advice to them if they want to bring a product into the country or brand something new into this country? What's your advice for that, George?
I'm going first again, huh? So I'm not an expert on this, but I would say first, make sure you have real demand for your product in the country, right? So you make sure there's really a market for your product, right? And then it's sort of traditional. You need to come to us with a program that's going to generate trial, going to generate awareness, and then repeat purchase, right? It's sort of as simple as that. You have to come to us with a complete marketing plan. I would say this. I don't know about everybody else up here, but we're not guinea pigs for anybody's brand. There's a ton of new items get launched every year. So you need to come to us with a comprehensive program on how you're going to, like I said, get trial, generate awareness, and get repeat purchase. And that's kind of a long-term plan. It takes an investment to do so. So you have to be willing to invest in this market in order to enter it.
Awesome. Dennis?
Okay, in our distribution center in Hunts Point, we've got a lot of what we'll call international items. And we're very excited about this opportunity tomorrow. We'll have two people here all day. Mike Rios, who's our procurement manager, and Sandra Hedberg, she's our category manager of that international brand. And they've been instructed not to come back without a bag full of opportunities. So we're looking forward to that. But similar to what George said, I think finding the distributor is only one part of the equation. And we could deliver product in the 5 boroughs of New York as efficiently as anybody. But there's a lot more to the job. That's just getting the product in. It's how do we get it out onto the shelf and from the shelf to the consumers, into the consumer's shopping basket. And the way to do that is part of what we have to offer all these suppliers that are here this week. And that's a fully integrated program with marketing services, merchandising services, advertising services, and retail services. So when you're looking for distributors, we ask you to look at it from a broader view. So it's not just putting products in, and use George's term, let us be your guinea pig. It's developing programs that are going to help pull it through the supply chain.
Right. Jonathan?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I would echo what both of them are saying. It's having a plan, really. It's having a merchandising plan, having a plan to distribute your products, and a marketing plan. I can't tell you how many times I've seen, I'm sure many of us have seen, people who have a great merchandising plan or a great distribution plan. They're in tons of stores, but they have no marketing plan. So what happens? They sit on the shelf, and basically, get discontinued after a certain period of time. Conversely, you can have a great marketing plan, and you spend tons of money on getting the awareness and product, and consumer awareness, but you end up having no distribution. So it's really, coming up with a really concise plan that encompasses both of those things to make sure that, you're successful.
Is there an international new product in protein?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I couldn't agree more with what everyone on the panel said. I mean, you need a concise marketing plan. And what, I don't know if anyone mentioned this, but you need the right partner. And that partner needs to be invested also and have a reason to be pushing your product and investing in your product. So, I mean, basically, know who your market is, know who you're targeting, and know who the horse is that can get you there. So, pretty much it.
That said, and after all this information that we heard, what's your guys' opinion on the future of the independent grocer? Give us some insight. Most of us here are independent, no matter how big the chain. Some guys have one store, some guys may have 20 or 30, but we're all independent. And give us some good information about the future, something optimistic.
90% of my business is the independent marketplace, and I'm bullish on our business and their business. Operating a store at 6,000, 8,000, 10,000, anything under 20,000 square feet. Most of these national chains, hope none of my customers are here, or those national chains, I don't think so, but they don't know what they're doing in a store like that. It's not their place, and it is our place. And we know how to handle it. We're in touch with the neighborhoods, we're in touch with the people, we have the tempo, and we continue to be flexible. And flexibility is our friend. So I think it's a bright future.
I think it's just about how do you create a good customer experience and, provide value to all of the consumers that you have, both in store and online. Making sure that you have a point of differentiation and that, you're catering to the needs of your local consumers. You have the products that they need, all of the distribution that they need, and, ultimately, it's
looking good.
Getting that consumer.
So, Carlos, we're bullish on the independent retailer as well. Obviously, at Crasdale, that's 100% of our business. It's been that way for 115 years. So when Kevin Gallagher's market study just came out, we should all feel good about that, because in the New York market, it's like no other market in the country. The independent retailer is still the strength in this marketplace. You go to other parts of the country, 20, 30 years ago, the independent retailer was strong and vibrant. Not anymore. I think George will agree, Florida's starting to become that way, but yes. That's growing rapidly, and we're all keeping an eye on that. But we should all feel good that because of the uniqueness of the marketplace, because of some of the things that John said, that you have to know the neighborhood, you have to know what's going on within the neighborhood. We don't look at as the New York boroughs as boroughs. We look at them as a collage of neighborhoods. And that's really how the business really evolves and works in New York. And it's very difficult and challenging. Don't take for what we do for granted. And I mean that as you, because what you do and the challenges you're up against are extremely difficult. And we've seen that with the exodus of the big chains. They just can't handle it.
Yeah, when big chains go out, we come in, correct? So we take them boxes over. Close us out, George.
So Carlos gave us a quick peek at the questions ahead of time, and when I saw that last one, I got a chuckle out of it. I'm like, I'm not sure any of the four of us are going to come up here and say, "Oh my God, the independent market is not going, is going to be terrible." Everybody's going to say, "Hey, the independent market is going to be bullish as hell, right?" Or else we wouldn't be in business. Of course, we're going to say it's going to do great. But I know this: during the pandemic, the independent thrived, right? The independent shares, increase a lot more than any of the chains. So the independent operators are super resilient. They have the autonomy to do exactly what they need to meet each of their consumers' needs. And really, the owner-operator, it's amazing if you're in somebody's store, everybody walks through that door, they know their name. And you just don't get that in a chain. So I think in the 5 boroughs, I use a fact often, I think there's like 970 food stores, give or take, in the 5 boroughs. I think 905 of them are independent. So this is by far the largest independent market in the country. And like I said, the independent owner-operator is the most resilient, I think, operator that there is. And I agree. I think that it has a long history of doing really well. You know, independent operators have been under attack for a long time, right? You had club come in, you had merchandise. Now you've got the limited assortment operators. You've got the online shopping. Everybody tries to take that business, but the independent operator still continues to thrive. So I agree with everybody else up here that yeah, I think it's in great shape for a long time to come.
But I think the other thing is, you know, our competition is not just traditional grocery stores anymore. That's right. It's C-stores, it's drug stores, it's everything under the sun. Everybody wants to sell groceries nowadays, right? So we have to continue to adapt and figure out how are we going to compete with all these different classes of trade and make sure that we provide, again, that point of differentiation, that in-store experience, that customer service that really sets us apart and our stores apart from.
And one of those ways is the periphery of the store. And in perishables, not to, obviously that's my business, but really I think that differentiates the independent grocer. So
That's awesome, that's awesome. And I want to repeat something that our president, Sammy Collado, said. He said it in Spanish, and he said, there's no crisis without solution, and there's no solution without determination. And I think that goes very well said for the independents. So thank you very much. I want to thank the panelists for taking their time and bearing with me. I want to thank the NSA, Sammy, the board, and everybody for creating this platform, because I think it's very powerful for us to hear this information, hear from our peers, hear from companies like Unify, and hopefully next year we could have a lot more retailers and a lot more vendors in the room. It'll be even better. So good job, Anthony. Great job. Great job, William. Thank you.
good job.
Oh, yeah. I gotta get in the middle. He's the tallest one. He's gonna make me look shorter.
All right, let's thank our panel again for another informational panel. And so, as we continue on, I want to also acknowledge some people in the room. The president of Pan American Grain, Jose González Freire. Y el ingeniero Eligio Jaques, del cónsul de la República Dominicana. All right, give me 1 second here. Okay, so for our last speaker of the evening, we have someone very special with us tonight. She is a very special individual woman with more than 25 years of experience in the industrial sector. She is the current executive president and the CEO of Grupo SID, and representing the leadership of one of the most important companies of the Dominican Republic. Please help me welcome Ms. Ligia Bonetti.
En 1937, un joven emprendedor llamado José María Bonetti Burgos, mejor conocido como Santana, tuvo una visión, una idea, un sueño de cultivar en tierras fértiles dominicanas semillas de maní para desarrollar su gran proyecto. proyecto que tuvo como propósito llevar bienestar a la comunidad y a su vez la generación de nuevos empleos. Fruto de esa cosecha, hace 85 años, recibimos el primer puñado de maní, ese que nos permitió emprender una industria de aceites comprometida con el bienestar, desencadenando a su vez impactos positivos en las comunidades y los hogares dominicanos. Desde ese día ha iniciado nuestro trayecto, que se ha caracterizado por la búsqueda incansable de crecimiento y expansión, y en el cual se han ido plasmando nuestras huellas. Huellas que son producto del esfuerzo y trabajo que nos impulsó a continuar abriendo puertas hacia un futuro prometedor. La evolución de los mercados mundiales nos llevó a pensar en variedades, tendencias y mejor calidad. Los cimientos sólidos implantados por Santana y su socio Jesús Armentero Seis Dedos indiscutiblemente trajeron consigo un legado trascendental para las futuras generaciones que surge de su unión inquebrantable, compromiso y lealtad. Estos tiempos de los años 70 no fueron fáciles. Dificultades políticas, económicas y sociales trajeron pronto a la mesa de trabajo a los dos hijos de Santana, José Miguel y Roberto, quienes de la mano de sus socios, Enrique y José Manuel Armenteros, continuaron expandiendo su visión, con el objetivo de lograr grandes avances en procesos de manufactura. Nos unimos aliados internacionales. Diversificación sería la palabra clave que define esta época, donde emprendimos proyectos de molienda de maíz y manufactura de productos de limpieza, lo cual nos permitió continuar abriendo puertas importantes para conseguir los mejores resultados. Para los años 90, nuestro país se acercaba a la era de apertura y globalización. Esto implicó grandes retos para obtener productos de calidad mundial. Lograrlo solo era posible reclutando el mejor talento, que con su preparación y ganas inmensas de prosperar, darían frente a este gran desafío. Ese equipo de colaboradores, donde ya se incorporaba la tercera generación, buscaría establecer alianzas con empresas multinacionales, garantizando así un crecimiento sostenible, relaciones duraderas y mejores prácticas mundiales, para seguir marcando el camino de huellas imborrables en el tiempo. Para completar la triada, dimos la bienvenida y unimos experiencia con la familia Vitienes, grandes productores dominicanos de productos de consumo masivo. El comercio en la República Dominicana prosperaba. Pequeñas, medianas y grandes empresas abrían sus puertas a una gran variedad de productos y el consumidor dominicano cada vez más tenía opciones, por lo que era inevitable continuar emprendiendo y diversificando nuestra oferta. Si hacemos un recorrido en nuestras mentes y visualizamos cada huella plasmada en el camino transitado, ha permanecido la prioridad de crear bienestar, la misma que fue concebida por nuestros fundadores, como compromiso con las comunidades más necesitadas. Llevar alegría, esperanza y optimismo a cada rincón de nuestro entorno continúa siendo nuestro deseo. Hacer historia en la vida de los dominicanos a través de nuestra contribución al deporte, al arte, a la cultura y a las tradiciones nos ha hecho abrir nuevas puertas. La unión con la familia Rivera reforzó el respeto y orgullo por nuestro país, manteniendo el direccionamiento de continuar ofreciendo lo mejor de nosotros a todo el pueblo dominicano. Con una visión estratégica, vanguardista, esperanzadora y llena de energía, salimos a conquistar tierras internacionales, convencidos de nuestras fortalezas y de que la República Dominicana tiene el potencial, la competitividad y el talento para brillar donde quiera que se lo proponga. Esta mentalidad de crecimiento nos ha llevado a expandirnos, posicionándonos hoy en 17 países. 85 años después de aquel primer puñado de maní, celebramos junto a ustedes estas huellas que hemos plasmado y las puertas que se han abierto a lo largo del tiempo, porque sin duda alguna, ustedes han sido nuestros compañeros y aliados, el motor que nos impulsa a levantarnos después de caer y el mayor motivo para compartir nuestras grandes victorias. Hello. I hope you all are having a good evening. I'm really pleased. I'm filled with joy and enthusiasm to be here tonight in this special night for all of us. I would like to first say hello, and I will go to Spanish because I was told to do it in Spanish, and now I'm totally opposite of my friend from Goya. I was told to do it in Spanish, so I'll go to Spanish, but I really appreciate all of you being here tonight. Para nosotros y para el Grupo SID, en la persona del presidente Collado, queremos darle las gracias por esta invitación. Realmente nosotros como Grupo SID nos sentimos que estamos en nuestra casa desde el primer momento. Al señor Samuel Collado, muchas gracias de nuevo. Al honorable Eligio Jaques, cónsul general de la República Dominicana, gracias por estar aquí hoy. A la señora Nali de Jesús, vicepresidente del NSA, y en ella a todos los miembros de la Junta Directiva. Al señor Anthony Peña, chairman del NSA, al señor Bob Unaniu de Goya, así como a mis colegas del Grupo SID, José Miguel Bonetti Dubrey, CEO de Mercasid, Roberto Bonetti Pastoriza, vicepresidente corporativo de exportaciones y alianzas estratégicas, y en ellos a los demás miembros del Grupo SID que se encuentran aquí, a los invitados especiales, y quizás un invitado muy especial para mí, mi ex ministro de Agricultura, Osmar Benítez, a quien aprecio y a quien valoro como un gran amigo. Gracias, Osmar, por estar aquí. A todos ustedes, espero que nos hayan acogido de una manera con el mismo entusiasmo y con el mismo cariño con el que hemos venido nosotros aquí hoy. Y a los que nos siguen en las redes, pues también queremos darle una cordial bienvenida y agradecerles el que estén con nosotros. Esta puerta que acabo de cruzar simboliza la entrada a un futuro que, si bien es incierto, estamos dispuestos a caminarlos llenos de entusiasmo, llenos de esperanza, optimismo, energía y determinación. Un futuro que tenemos el deber de crear con espíritu de emprendedor, en medio de cualquier turbulencia global. Así implementamos nosotros, desde Grupo SID, nuestro modelo empresarial, fundamentado en nuestros valores: crecer, servir, proteger y compartir, y guiado siempre por nuestros pilares de la cultura organizacional, que es diferenciación, excelencia, pasión y entrega. Así es que logramos cumplir con nuestra misión, con nuestro objetivo principal de crear bienestar. Los invito a ver este video que resume en imágenes quiénes verdaderamente somos. Adelante.
Somos un grupo vanguardista, con más de 5.300 colaboradores, 130 marcas, 17 certificados de calidad, 23 plantas de manufactura, 11 centros de distribución, 496 flotillas de distribución y ventas, más de 2.000 SKUs, 716 integrantes en nuestra fuerza de venta y más de 50.000 clientes directos, promoviendo la adaptabilidad, la flexibilidad y la innovación en todas nuestras acciones, siempre entregando lo mejor de nosotros. Suplimos en todo el país, de norte a sur, de este a oeste, brindando marcas de calidad y confianza a nuestros consumidores. Nuestros valores nos inspiran. Hay que tener hambre para crecer, pasión para servir, proteger con la razón, compartir con el corazón. Nuestra cultura organizacional es única. Gracias a nuestros pilares, nuestros colaboradores entregan todos los días su mejor versión. Estamos comprometidos en generar bienestar y mejorar la calidad de vida de la sociedad a través de nuestros programas y acciones de responsabilidad social corporativa. Fundación Caminantes por la Vida. Luchando juntos por la prevención, concientización y erradicación de la enfermedad del cáncer en la República Dominicana. EducaSID, programa que promueve la educación inclusiva y equitativa de calidad. ReforestaSID, jornadas de reforestación en zonas productoras de agua, en alianza con Fondo Agua Santo Domingo. Inclúyeme, programa que fomenta la inclusión laboral de personas con discapacidad, mejorando su calidad de vida. Apoyando el deporte, comprometidos con nuevos talentos deportivos. Apoyamos y celebramos nuestra cultura y nuestras costumbres. En Grupo SID estamos dispuestos a ir más lejos, con presencia en 17 países. Nos tomamos muy en serio el bienestar de la sociedad y del planeta. Y este esfuerzo por reducir los impactos negativos al medio ambiente nos ha permitido ganar 38 veces el Premio Nacional a la producción más limpia. Entendemos que debemos continuar con el legado de nuestros fundadores, un legado de honestidad, trabajo, esfuerzo y solidaridad. Un legado que recuerde a las nuevas generaciones la importancia de la trascendencia en el tiempo a través de la unión, propósito y futuro. Somos Grupo SID.
Gracias. En este año 2022 cumplimos 85 años. Y como ya vieron en nuestro video de apertura, hemos pasado por muchos momentos que han marcado cada huella que hemos ido dejando en el camino. Huellas de solidaridad, huellas de esperanza, huellas de alegría y más que nada huellas de bienestar. Como grupo, no solo trabajamos para producir o distribuir productos de primera necesidad, también pensamos en llevar bienestar a toda la población que tanto lo necesita. Por eso, dedicamos muchos recursos y nuestro tiempo a los planes de responsabilidad social corporativa, especialmente en las ramas de salud, educación, deporte y medio ambiente. Creemos que de nada nos sirve estar bien si los demás no están bien. Hace un año tuve el honor de dirigirme a la comunidad dominicana aquí en Nueva York, junto al presidente de la República, Luis Abinader, y el ministro de Turismo, David Collado, para presentar nuestra marca país. Esta comisión público-privada de marca país está comprometida con elevar el orgullo patrio, proyectarle al mundo nuestras fortalezas y atraer más inversión y desarrollo, de manera que crezcamos como país y generemos más oportunidades para todos los dominicanos. República Dominicana necesita de un empresariado responsable, que sepa estar presente en las buenas y las no tan buenas, que sepa colaborar más y criticar menos. Un empresariado cuya agenda común sea nuestro país y que no piense en las cosas que nos dividen, sino más bien en todas las que nos unen, como amor a la República Dominicana. Un empresariado que esté dispuesto a no voltear la cara a las adversidades de los más vulnerables y a involucrarse de manera desinteresada desde el sector privado en la búsqueda de soluciones a los temas de interés nacional. República Dominicana tiene los brazos abiertos al mundo, está en su mejor momento. Nuestro país ha podido superar con estadísticas satisfactorias una pandemia que afectó a todo el mundo. Hemos sido reconocidos por organismos internacionales como Moody's, el Fondo Monetario Internacional y la Organización Mundial del Turismo como el país número 1 en la recuperación del turismo. Somos ejemplo de resiliencia y trabajo. Este es el momento de unir esfuerzos y generar sinergias que sean necesarias para promover el desarrollo, la inversión y mejorar la calidad de vida de todos los dominicanos que tanto queremos. Nosotros, desde el sector privado, apostamos a ese futuro, bajo una visión de colaboración público-privada y de responsabilidad ciudadana. A ese mejor futuro apostamos nosotros, los ejecutivos del Grupo SID, aferrados a dejar un legado de huellas positivas que trasciendan Y eso lo hemos venido haciendo desde el terreno del juego, como dicen en el argot del béisbol. Somos un equipo de gente que entrega todos los días su mejor versión y por eso no nos conformamos. Buscamos seguir creciendo con innovación, flexibilidad y adaptabilidad. Hay que solo ver cómo durante esta pandemia del COVID-19 nuestras empresas no detuvieron sus operaciones ni un solo día y a los dominicanos no les faltó nunca un solo de nuestros productos. A nuestro gran equipo de más de 5.300 colaboradores, yo quisiera darles un fuerte aplauso para que lo oigan en la República Dominicana. Al asumir la posición de presidenta ejecutiva y CEO del Grupo SID, nos pusimos como meta expandir nuestros negocios fuera de la República Dominicana, pues estábamos conscientes que las oportunidades eran inmensas. Por eso, 7 años más tarde, estar aquí ante ustedes es para nosotros un gran privilegio, es para nosotros la máxima satisfacción saber que estamos aquí gracias al acojo que tuvieron ustedes y al apoyo que recibimos de ustedes, cada uno de los miembros de este NSA. A ustedes un fuerte aplauso. Estados Unidos es el principal socio comercial de nuestro país y la comunidad hispana es cada vez más importante y tiene mayor relevancia. Y ni hablar de los dominicanos que viven aquí. A ellos le debemos su lealtad, a ellos le debemos cada día que nos han entrado a sus hogares con nuestros productos. Pero nosotros no somos simples exportadores, nosotros creemos en la creación de relaciones duraderas, amigables, profesionales, generar esta alianza ganar-ganar que permita el crecimiento continuo y satisfacer las necesidades de los diferentes consumidores. Por eso la clave para nosotros es la unión honesta y sincera. ¿Es vender un par de contenedores para nosotros algo importante? No. La realidad es que nuestro objetivo es lograr que no haya un solo consumidor que quiera llevarse un saborcito dominicano a su casa y no lo consiga. Ese es nuestro objetivo, que sí pueda conseguirlo. Nosotros queremos estar en los hogares de todos los latinoamericanos que viven en Estados Unidos. ¿Que es un plan ambicioso? Sí, pero nosotros con determinación y la colaboración de cada uno de ustedes, estamos seguros que podremos lograrlo. Nuestro grupo está entrando en toda una transformación digital para lograr optimizar no solo los procesos de manufactura, sino también la manera ágil de comprar y de vender y de hacer negocios. Estamos aliados a compañías como Amazon Web Services y nuestra transformación va de la mano con empresas como McKinsey, Deloitte, Blue Yonder, entre otros. Nuestro compromiso con ustedes será siempre traer innovación de productos, será también brindarles el mejor servicio y garantizar una óptima calidad en cada uno de los productos que fabricamos y de ser sus aliados en este camino hace 85 años más. Nuestro propósito es dejar huellas que trasciendan en el tiempo, que marquen un antes y un después y que nos permitan continuar abriendo puertas por el mundo. Pero eso solo lo podremos hacer uniendo esfuerzo con ustedes y logrando acuerdos que permitan que nos ayudemos unos con otros. En este 85 aniversario hemos querido lanzar una campaña que lleva un mensaje de lo que para el Grupo SID es lo más importante, nuestra principal empresa, la familia. Y lo hacemos convencidos que la familia es el centro de toda sociedad. Es donde se fundamentan los valores de nuestros niños y desde donde podemos forjar hombres y mujeres de bien. Por eso, nuestra campaña es un tributo a las familias, a las que nos han preferido y permitido entrar a sus hogares con nuestros productos, tanto en República Dominicana como en el extranjero y como aquí, ustedes, la familia del NSA. Veamos.
¿Qué nos une como la familia dominicana? Nos une lo que sentimos, compartir. Nos une el compromiso, los sueños de nuestra gente. Nos une la alegría, el deseo de superarnos, la música, el deporte, las tradiciones y el esfuerzo. Más que lo que hacemos, nos une lo que somos. Creando productos y servicios de calidad para la República Dominicana y el mundo. Ofreciendo bienestar y representando unidad en las familias.
Estamos convencidos que lograr perdurar 85 años más, y la tecnología siempre nos falla, por eso siempre hay que tener un buen papel, estamos convencidos que perdurar 85 años más requerirá de nosotros realizar lo que hemos llamado una transformación consciente, una transformación tecnológica, una transformación organizacional y quizás la más relevante de todas, una transformación mental. El cambio de mentalidad, aprender a ser flexibles, ágiles y adaptables a las circunstancias, continúa siendo un gran reto, pero uno que con seguridad y con una actitud decisiva podemos continuar fortaleciendo para poder celebrar nuevas conquistas. Y es que nosotros los dominicanos somos personas alegres, somos personas apasionadas y sobre todo somos optimistas. El dominicano siempre está bien, contento y dispuesto a celebrar en cualquier ocasión. Nos encanta recordar los buenos momentos de la vida con el vecino, en el colmado y hasta con desconocidos. Siempre vemos lo positivo de cada paso y las huellas que vamos dejando. Y queremos agradecer y compartir y generar un mayor compromiso con cada una de las personas con las quien nos relacionamos. Ese espíritu que caracteriza al dominicano no lo podemos perder nunca, pues es algo que nos identifica y nos distingue de la multitud. Es por esto que con este deseo de celebrar hemos conmemorado este 85 aniversario desarrollando un comercial donde celebramos a los que sueñan y tienen la valentía para hacer realidad esos sueños, como ustedes, cuando sus padres o ustedes vinieron por primera vez aquí a los Estados Unidos buscando ese sueño y ese mejor futuro para sus familias. Nosotros fomentamos y celebramos a los emprendedores, a la cultura, a los que vienen a una comunidad a trabajar. Celebramos los que cuidan a sus envejecientes, los que se cuidan a sí mismos. Celebramos y abrazamos a todas las personas y los jóvenes que quieren un mejor futuro para sus familias. Nosotros, como ejemplo de generación en generación, queremos celebrar con la familia en general y en particular con la que más queremos, que es la nuestra, este comercial que hemos desarrollado y queremos que ustedes se identifiquen con este espíritu y esta energía que hemos querido plasmar, donde a Nueva York lo incluimos en nuestro comercial. Adelante.
Unidos por los que salen desde temprano. Por nuestra gente de todos lados. Good morning, bro. Por los de nuestra comunidad. ¡Vamos a celebrar! La música con nosotros está. Alimentando nuestros sueños va. ¡Vamos a celebrar! Que unidos por la familia todos vamos a cantar. ¡Vamos a celebrar! Por la doña y su sazón, que de ejemplo de sabor, por lo que se ponen a inventar, que para adelante quieren mirar. ¡Vamos a celebrar! Por los que se juntan en la esquina. Hoy yo cumplo 75. Por los que juegan en las menores y por los grandes ligas. Vamos a celebrar. Por los que se cuidan de cuerpo y de corazón. Vamos a celebrar. Vamos a celebrar. Por las generaciones unidas por un futuro mejor. Vamos a celebrar. Vamos a celebrar. Que unidos por la familia todos vamos a cantar. Vamos a celebrar. Vamos a celebrar. Aquí todos somos familia, una familia unida puede más. Vamos a celebrar. Vamos a celebrar. Grupo SID. 85 años unidos por tu familia.
Trajeron a Nueva York ahí cuando él se tiró por el tanque de aceite y llegó al apartamento en Nueva York, a ese hogar donde aquí nos han acogido. No quiero despedirme sin antes felicitarlos a todos ustedes de verdadero corazón, felicitarlos por ser ejemplo de trabajo digno, de éxito y verdaderos representantes de lo que es tener tesón, coraje y prosperidad. En Grupo SID tenemos nuestro propio himno, un himno que conjuga en sus letras quiénes somos nosotros como dominicanos, como seres humanos y más que nada como la familia del Grupo SID. Ese himno lleva el sentimiento de una bella nación, un lugar en el mundo llamado República Dominicana, una tierra llena de esperanza, llena de gente que sueña, gente que ama y de la cual todos nosotros nos sentimos profundamente comprometidos con ellos y profundamente orgullosos de ellos. Ha sido y es un verdadero honor estar aquí con ustedes hoy. Para mí, hablar ante ustedes, un público que nos ha acogido desde hace ya varios años, que nos ha permitido ampliar nuestro sueño y llegar aquí, es verdaderamente un gran motivo de satisfacción, de orgullo y también de agradecimiento, con mucha humildad. Queremos desearles la mejor de la suerte en estos próximos días de convención que tendrán y gracias por regalarnos este tiempo. Gracias a la invitación de nuevo al NSA y los dejo con esta manifestación musical que las palabras llegan a nuestro corazón, a cada uno de los 5.300 miembros de nuestra familia del Grupo SID. Este es nuestro himno que con orgullo se lo cantamos a ustedes. Muchas gracias. Veamos.
Gente que siente y trabaja por una bella nación, cosechando corazones, corazones de algodón. Una tierra de esperanza en el trayecto del sol. Te despierta con orgullo y te regala una flor. Mira cómo ondea mi bandera arriba. Oh, oh, oh. Mira cómo ondea mi bandera arriba. Oh, oh. Es sembrar cada momento, es vivir lo más intenso. Día a día con amor, dominicano es orgullo y pasión. Mira cómo ondea mi bandera arriba. Oh, oh, oh. Mira cómo ondea mi bandera arriba. Oh, oh. Gente que siente y trabaja por una bella nación, cosechando corazones, corazones de algodón. Oh, oh, oh. Mira cómo ondea mi bandera arriba. Es el orgullo, es la confianza. Es una tierra llena de esperanza. Gente que sueña, gente que ama. Es una isla que crece y trabaja. Cosechando corazones con orgullo y compasión. Día a día con amor. Dominicano es orgullo y pasión. Hoy es el día dominicano. Vive el orgullo dominicano.
All right, hello everybody. Give it up once again for Ligia Bonetti. And before we end the evening, I would like to also thank Anthony Cardona, who is the Department Business Development Officer from the government of Puerto Rico. All right, and with that, I'd like to thank all of you for your energy, the support that you've given the NSA throughout the years, and the attention that you've given us this evening. So I am very honored that I was able to MC this great event here for you guys tonight. That's, characterized by the Hispanic culture, characterized by stories of success and overcoming struggle. So thank you all for being here tonight. Now you get to enjoy some cocktails or some mocktails if you don't really drink. And I'll be in the corner signing autographs. I'm just kidding, I won't be. But thank you so much. Have a great evening. We'll see you next year.